The boardroom of St. Jude's Memorial is dead silent, save for the hum of the HVAC and the rhythmic, heavy breathing of a man with a broken nose bleeding onto the mahogany table. For heavily armed men in unmarked tactical gear hold the exits. At the head of the table, the hospital's chief executive stares down the barrel of a rifle, forced to sign away the facility's digital keys. In the corner, a woman in a faded blue scrub dress quietly sweeps shattered glass into a dustpan. Her name tag reads Elena. The lead captor glances at her, sneering to the executive. She's just a maid. He doesn't notice how she positions her body, blending into the shadows, calculating the angles of the room, and measuring the distance to the primary exit. They think they have taken a hospital hostage. They do not know they have just locked themselves in a room with the former chief of internal affairs for the Defense Intelligence Agency. And they're about to learn just the linoleum floors of St. Jude's Memorial Hospital reflected the harsh, buzzing glow of fluorescent lights. It was 3:15. At this hour, the administrative wing was a ghost town, stripped of the daytime chaos of frantic physicians and weeping families. The only sound was the rhythmic, hollow swish-slosh of a damp microfiber mop slicing through the silence. Elena held the aluminum handle with a loose, practiced grip. To anyone walking past, she was a fixture of the background. A 52-year-old woman with graying hair pulled into a tight bun, dressed in an oversized, faded blue scrub dress that hung loosely on her frame. Her shoulders were slightly slouched, a deliberate posture meant to project fatigue and compliance. She was invisible, and she worked hard to keep it that way. Elena guided the mop in precise, overlapping figure-8 patterns. It was the standard efficiency protocol for environmental services, but to Elena, it served a dual purpose. As her arms moved in a rhythmic cadence, her eyes, sharp, dark, and entirely detached from the exhaustion she feigned, mapped the corridor. 3 paces to the fire exit. The door was heavy-gauge steel, requiring roughly 80 pounds of pressure to force if the magnetic lock failed. 2 paces to the utility closet. The ceiling tile inside provided direct access to the HVAC crawl space. The executive lounge was silent, bathed in the soft, ambient glow of low-voltage recessed lighting. Elena stood before the high-end espresso machine, her gloved fingers resting lightly on the stainless steel casing. The digital display read, Error 404, COM failure. It wasn't a mechanical jam. The machine was networked into the hospital's centralized smart grid. It had lost its internal handshake with a local server. Elena didn't touch the buttons. Instead, she slowly turned her head toward the expansive floor-to-ceiling windows that overlooked the south parking lot and the distant ambulance bay 4 stories below. The night was overcast, heavy clouds swallowing the moonlight. Down in the bay, the standard amber and blue emergency lights of the idling vehicles were absent. In their place sat a single, matte black delivery van. It carried no commercial logos, no municipal license plates, and its headlights were entirely blacked out. Elena's eyes narrowed. She counted 3 figures exiting the rear doors of the van. Their movements were synchronized, rapid, and low to the ground. The heavy, metallic thud of the hospital's pneumatic fire doors sealing shut echoed through the ventilation shafts. It was a sound Elena knew well, the definitive acoustic signature of a building undergoing a hard facility isolation. A low, synthesized chime pulsed through the administrative wing, followed by the automated voice of the building's emergency system. Code red. Facility is in lockdown. Remain in your designated sectors until cleared by security. Elena stood motionless in the shadow of the maintenance alcove. The automated system thought it was responding to a fire or a technical malfunction. She knew better. The intruders had tapped into the building's primary environmental control panel, initiating a localized lockdown to restrict the movement of staff and trap the executive board on the 4th floor. Footsteps began to echo from the south stairwell, crisp, deliberate, and heavy. The sound of combat boots on concrete. Elena slowly pivoted her cart, moving with the unhurried, heavy-footed stride of an exhausted night worker. She slipped out of the alcove just as the heavy fire door at the end of the hall clicked into its locked position. Through the reinforced wire glass of the double doors leading to the main the latch of the service door clicked, a sharp, metallic snap that signaled the breach of Elena's immediate sector. The operator stepped through the threshold, his carbine raised, the weapon's flashlight cutting a harsh, clean white beam through the dusty air of the corridor. He moved behind the light, his body low, his weight distributed perfectly across the balls of his feet to minimize noise. Elena did not move. She stood 5 paces deep into the dark alcove, her back pressed flat against the concrete block wall, her faded scrub dress blending into the shadows. She had deliberately left her janitorial cart parked at an angle 3 yards down the hall, the yellow mop bucket catching the edge of the operator's flashlight. The operator saw the cart, his weapon tracked toward it, the beams scanning the handles, the spray bottles, the empty hallways beyond. He assumed the worker had fled when the automated alarm sounded. He took 2 slow steps past Elena's hiding spot, his attention focused entirely on the visual bait ahead. From her position in the dark, Elena analyzed him in less than 2 seconds. The electrical service closet was cramped, smelling of ionized dust and stale machine oil. Elena stood before the primary telecommunications distribution frame for the administrative floor, her face illuminated only by the faint green status LEDs of the fiber optic switches. With practiced efficiency, she bypassed the digital security casing using a simple, flat-headed screwdriver from her apron pocket. She exposed the analog terminal blocks, the raw copper override lines that the hospital's IT department rarely touched anymore. Elena pulled a lightweight, specialized phone butt set from the hollowed-out base of a secondary tool in her kit. She clipped the red and black alligator leads directly onto the terminal pins associated with the 4th-floor boardroom intercom speaker. She pressed the receiver to her ear. Instantly, the audio from the boardroom flooded the small closet, crisp and terrifyingly intimate. "The ledger is updated," a voice said. It was Julian Vance, his throat dry, his breathing shallow. "But the secondary authentication requires a hardware token from the central pharmacy safe. I don't have access to that. Only the chief medical officer does." "Then find him," a cold, flat voice replied. This was the group's leader. His tone was devoid of anger, which Elena did not run. She stepped out of the service closet and walked with a measured, deliberate stride toward the mechanical room at the end of the east corridor. Inside, the massive heart of the hospital's climate control system roared. A wall of industrial valves, pressurized tanks, and heavy-gauge steel pipes. She bypassed the main control interface, which Novak's tech specialist had likely mirrored on a portable tablet. Instead, she went directly to the manual override wheel of the automated fire suppression system for the administrative wing. The system did not use water. To protect the sensitive electronic servers, it was primed with Halon 1301, a liquefied gas that blankets an environment, extinguishing fire by instantly disrupting the chemical reaction of combustion. In high concentrations, it severely limits oxygen absorption. It doesn't kill immediately, but it induces rapid dizziness, blurred vision, and cognitive disorientation within seconds. The white, sterile mist of the halon gas hung heavy in the air, swirling like ground fog around Elena's ankles as she stepped out into the open expanse of the administrative lobby. The emergency strobes pulsed rhythmically, casting long, geometric shadows across the walls. At the top of the grand, central staircase, 2 gray-clad operators emerged from the haze. They held a trembling, frail older man by the arms. Dr. Eris Thorne, the hospital's 70-year-old chief of pediatric medicine. His white coat was torn at the shoulder, and his chest heaved as he struggled to breathe the oxygen-depleted air. One of the operators pushed him forward, forcing his knees against the cold marble railing that overlooked the 4-story drop. The silence that filled the boardroom was no longer the silence of fear. It was the heavy, suffocating pressure that precedes a detonation. Elena sat perfectly upright in the mahogany chair. The slouch in her spine was gone. Her shoulders were squared, and when she raised her eyes to meet Novak's, the illusion of the fragile, terrified Maid vanished completely. Her gaze was cold, hollow, and utterly lethal. the look of an apex predator that had willingly walked into the trap just to locate the throat of its prey. "Your real name is Victor Novak," Elena said. Her voice wasn't loud, but it possessed a terrifyingly flat, administrative authority that cut through the room like a razor. Born October 14th, 1978 in Rostock. Former Hauptbootsman with the Spezialisiert Einsatzkraft Marine. Cashiered in 2012 for selling stolen night vision optics to Balkan syndicates. Supposed to be serving 20 years in a federal facility in Brandenburg. Novak froze. His hand instinctively drifted toward the grip of his Sig Sauer. The two operators guarding the door shifted their weight, their weapons tracking instantly toward the bound woman. "Who the hell are you?" Novak hissed, his eyes narrowing to slits. "The person who signed your arrest warrant in Hamburg 10 years ago," Elena replied calmly. She didn't look at his gun. "I was with the Defense Intelligence Agency's Internal Corruption Unit then. Today, I'm the person who knew you were coming before your van even cleared the south perimeter." "You're lying," Julian Vance whimpered from the floor, his mind unable to process the transition. "She cleans the toilets. She's just a maid." "Shut up, Vance," Elena snapped, not even turning her head. Her tone was like ice breaking under a boot. She turned her attention back to Novak. "At 3:24, you initiated a forced digital transfer of St. Jude's medical proprietary ledgers to a shell account routed through the Banque Nationale de Djibouti. You think you're minutes away from a $50 million payout. What your tech specialist hasn't told you, because he isn't cleared for it, is that the routing transit number you were provided by your inside source was flagged by the Federal Reserve 45 minutes ago." Novak's face went completely pale. He reached into his tactical vest, pulling out an encrypted military tablet. The screen was flashing a series of rapid, red alphanumeric codes. "The funds," Novak muttered, his fingers typing frantically. "They're frozen." "They aren't frozen, Victor. They're seized," Elena said softly. "The moment you initiated the handshake, my agency took ownership of the terminal. You haven't been extorting a hospital. You've been filling out a federal asset forfeiture report." "Kill her," Novak roared, stepping back and pulling his pistol. But Elena was already moving. She didn't try to break the thick plastic zip ties with raw, impossible strength. Instead, she utilized the structural weakness of the chair itself. During her 3 minutes of feigned compliance, she had worked the edge of the heavy, razor-sharp brass cleaning scraper, still tucked inside her apron pocket, against the tension line of the plastic locking mechanism behind her back. With a single, violent shrug of her shoulders, the sliced zip tie snapped. Before Novak's weapon could clear its holster, Elena lunged forward from the chair. She didn't use a flashy martial arts kick. She used a low-profile, high-efficiency maritime disarm. Her left hand clamped down on the cylinder of Novak's pistol, preventing the slide from cycling, while her right palm struck the base of his chin with sickening force. Crack! Novak's head snapped back, his teeth shattering as his weapon was violently ripped from his grip. Elena didn't hesitate. In one fluid, continuous motion, she spun the weapon around, her thumb dropping the safety, and fired 2 precise shots into the chest plates of the 2 operators by the door. Thud! Thud! The non-lethal, high-velocity ceramic rounds didn't penetrate their vests, but the sheer kinetic energy fractured their ribs, dropping them to their knees, gasping for air. Elena pivoted, the barrel of Novak's own pistol pressed firmly beneath his jawline, forcing him backward onto the mahogany boardroom table. Her breathing was steady. Her eyes were completely devoid of adrenaline. "The building is surrounded, Victor," Elena whispered into his ear, her voice cold and steady. "The local tactical teams are breaching the basement elevator shafts right now. It's over." Novak stared up at her, blood leaking from his mouth, his chest heaving in absolute defeat. He looked at the faded blue scrub dress, the gray hair pulled into a neat bun, and the absolute, unyielding authority in the eyes of the woman standing over him. He had spent his entire life studying weapons, but he had never realized that the most dangerous weapon in the room was the one he had chosen to ignore. The heavy, Rhythmic thud of flashbangs detonating on the lower floors vibrated up through the soles of Elena's shoes. Seconds later, the heavy oak doors of the boardroom were blown off their hinges. Federal Tactical. Down on the ground. Down on the ground. A flood of agents in black tactical gear, helmets, and full-face respirators poured into the room, their weapon lights cutting through the lingering halon haze. They immediately swarmed the two gasping operators by the door and forced Novak down onto the mahogany table, heavy boots pinning his shoulders. Elena didn't wait for them to look at her. The moment the first shield entered the room, she dropped Novak's pistol onto the table and stepped backward into the shadows of the executive lounge entry. She let her shoulders slouch. She pulled her hands into her sleeves, her face instantly resetting into the blank, tired mask of an old maid. Secured. Room is secured, an agent yelled. A tall man in a crisp charcoal suit walked past the tactical line. Agent in charge Miller. He looked at the cowering board members, then at the neutralized mercenaries. His eyes swept the room, searching for the source of the beacon. He spotted Elena standing quietly in the corner, her faded blue scrub dress covered in plaster dust. Miller walked over to her. He didn't say her name. He didn't offer a salute. The rules of her deep cover placement did not allow for acknowledgement, even in a room full of federal agents. "Are you uninjured, ma'am?" Miller asked, his tone professionally detached, though his eyes carried a profound, heavy respect. "I'm just a bit shaken up, sir," Elena murmured, her voice raspy and frail again. "Can I leave? I need to return my cart to the basement." Miller looked at her for a long moment, then nodded once, a barely perceptible dip of his chin. "Go ahead. The service elevator is clear. An officer will escort you out of the perimeter." "Thank you, sir," she whispered. As she turned to leave, Julian Vance was being helped to his feet by a medic. He looked across the room, his face pale and twisted with confusion as he saw Elena walking toward the exit. "Wait," Vance called out, his voice shaking. She did something. She talked to him. She knew his name. Who is she?" Miller stepped into Vance's line of sight, blocking his view of the door. "She's a hospital employee, Mr. Vance. You're in shock. Let the medics look at that nose." Elena walked out. The service elevator was empty. She rode it down to the sub-basement in absolute silence. The hum of the mechanics was the only sound. When the doors opened, she walked down the concrete corridor to the environmental services locker room. She opened locker 42. She took off the faded blue scrub dress and folded it neatly, placing it on the top shelf. Underneath it sat her real life, a pair of dark trousers, a simple black sweater, and a leather wallet containing an ID card with no expiration date. She didn't wait for the morning shift. She didn't stay to collect a paycheck or listen to the local news reports that would undoubtedly attribute the night's events to a brilliant, coordinated federal sting operation. She hung her plastic name tag, Elena, on the hook inside the locker. She closed the metal door, the click of the latch final and heavy. Elena walked up the concrete ramp of the ambulance bay, stepping out into the cool, damp air of the early dawn. The sky was a pale, bruising purple on the horizon. The sirens in the distance were fading, leaving only the quiet, ordinary sounds of a city waking up. She pulled her collar up against the morning chill, blended into the early commuter crowd, and disappeared into the gray light.